Stardate September 2013. Forever Cinematic embarks on a mission to boldly review what it has never reviewed before. The first 6 films of the Star Trek film franchise. Okay, so I got the bad Shatner Captain's Log impression out of the way for a little bit of comedy to jumpstart this thing, hopefully. And the first 6 films, with the original full cast, you got Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Sulu, Chekhov, Scotty, Uhura. This is a great set of characters put into a nice set of films that, even the lesser regarded ones that are even considered straight out bad films, I think there are certain qualities that are worthwhile in them, that there are certain shining moments in some of the bad stuff, and there's even films in this set that are just extraordinary pieces of work. And let's just jump into it with the first film, probably one of the lesser regarded ones, Star Trek The Motion Picture. So this film came out a little after Star Wars hit that. Paramount wondered, do we have a property that can build on that type of success? And Star Trek, in concept, with what the television series was, definitely was that kind of property. But the film that they made really had nothing at all to do with this style of film that a Star Wars film is, and rightfully so, but even then, it's not an exciting film. It's an excruciatingly, agonizingly, slow-paced film with a lot of sort of vanity visual effects sequences that a lot of them are exceptionally good. Now there are some dodgy effects in the film because there was a lot of rush scheduling in it and everything, but just because you got good visual effects doesn't mean you've got a good film. You have to have a story, you have to have a narrative flow and good progression and all these various plot elements that make a good story. And this one was rushed, they had a lot of script problems, and it kind of shows in the film that certain elements don't work very well. But I think what does work in the film, what works in every single one of these 6 films, is that Kirk, Spock, and McCoy dynamic between those 3 characters works so well. I love the point where McCoy's beamed onto the Enterprise for the first time. He's drafted back and he's being all kind of cranky, usual Bones McCoy type of stuff. And Kirk just turns to him and says, "I need you." That he needs him. That Kirk is not a guy who can just do it himself, as much as his ego might make him reflect that he can do all these things on himself. Underneath, Kirk knows that he needs these things. He doesn't have Spock at this point, but so he gets Bones. He knows, at least if he has McCoy there, he's got something. And when Spock is added into the equation, everything is just on the money. Everything just flows right. You just feel that dynamic working and creating that subtle energy between these characters that you can just feel that chemistry is building. And that's what really does work. Beyond anything else that doesn't work in the film, a lot of the plot elements, a lot of the excruciating slow pacing, because, like I said, they tried to make something that was Star Wars to build off of that, but it was so slow. It was much more akin to like a 2001 Space Odyssey with a lot of long visual effects sequences that don't really add up to anything. They don't drive forward the plot or have anything to do with the narrative. They're just there to be there. And visual effects alone, good or bad, don't make a film good. You have to have a story. And this film didn't do very well. It had a lot of critical panning, and Paramount needed something to change. They needed something radical to change in the creative department of Star Trek if they were going to have any future with it. And they got the right people with Harv Bennett, producer, and writer-director Nicholas Meyer for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Now there's how much I can really say about this film. This film has been reviewed and dissected and detailed in such gorgeous, amazing ways by so many great people that I could not go into detail about it. But the fact of the matter is that Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, beyond just being one of the best Star Trek movies, or one of the best things of the franchise, no matter what, television, film, whatever it is also a great film in and of itself outside of Star Trek. This is definitely a film that you could walk into without ever seeing anything Star Trek, not really knowing jack shit about Star Trek. You can walk into it and get a full, complete, amazing, fantastic story with great characters, great thematic dynamics, and this whole thing with dealing with Kirk and how he's feeling old and he's aging, while you got this guy Khan out there, Ricardo Montalban, doing a awesome, amazing, villainous performance that just sucks you in so deeply. And you got this guy out there who's been seething with vengeance for 15 years, and he wants to get Kirk, and Kirk just doesn't feel like the man he was, and he goes on this journey the whole way to the whole thing with the no-win situation, no-win scenario, all that kind of stuff. And there's all these great dynamic thematic elements just working so beautifully in this film, and James Horner's score is fantastic type of stuff. The visual effects are stunning. They hold up today. This is very good, exceptional optical effects work, but optical effects that can still stand up today in the CGI world when audiences are so used to that. That is good, amazing stuff. And Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is one of the best science fiction films ever made, flat out, period. Now it's difficult to go from that to another film, follow that up with something. Kirk has suffered the loss of Spock. Spock's dead. You got all this stuff going on, so it's a much more of a harder thing to follow up. And Star Trek III: The Search for Spock has been lesser regarded in the years since its release, because a lot of people kind of like, oh, well, those even Star Trek films are good, the odd ones are bad, and it just gets lumped in there. Star Trek III: The Search for Spock is a very good film. The problem is, the thing that doesn't get it up to Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan territory is that it doesn't quite have the thematic strength of storytelling that Khan had. Search for Spock does have those elements that it could deal with a lot of dynamics of life and death and sacrifice, where Kirk's got to sacrifice his ship, his son, all this other stuff to get Spock back to kind of feel like a complete person again, because Spock is so much a part of him. And Leonard Nimoy really does. He does a great job directing this film. He is very impressive with everything that he does here. I think Search for Spock is a very good film. I love Christopher Lloyd's Commander Krug character, and I think it's a character that, again, if there was a little bit more substance, a little bit more thematic material there for Lloyd to work off, I think it could have been a very exceptional villain in the series. As it is, he does a great job, but there's not a lot to work with, but he does more than a standard actor probably would. He pushes a little further. It gets a little more interesting that Krug is a guy who's not doing this out of vengeance. He's not a flat character, that he has certain motives, that he's working for the preservation of the Klingon Empire, for his race, the protection of it. And there could have been a little bit more substance, a little more depth added in there with maybe an extra scene or two. Him talking about his pride in his people, stuff like that. But Star Trek III, Search for Spock, is a film I really, really, really like. It's not as good as Wrath of Khan, but it's still a solid follow-up. It could have been a little stronger here and there, but it does a really, really good job with Nimoy in the helm, facing a lot of pressures as a first-time director and trying to follow up that amazing film. That he does a really good job, and segues into Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, where he was allowed to come back as director and have a lot more freedom to do things. And after a lot of heavy subject matter in the last two films, with people dying and all this revenge stuff and sacrifice and death and all this kind of stuff, want to do a light adventure type of thing. And I love Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. It's one of those films that I can still watch it today, and I really get a real nostalgic sense. I mean, I only started watching Star Trek in the early 90s. I even just had VHS tapes with pan and scan. I can still watch that film and get a real sense of nostalgia just from the look of the film, the feel of the film. It just has that warm feeling to me. And it is a great lighthearted adventure. There's not really an adversary. There's not an enemy you have to combat and deal with life and death and heavy subject matter. It's a lot more light, but it still has a certain message in it about environmentalism, stuff like that. And it's got great comedy that doesn't really turn to farcical territory. They're having light fun, but it's not making the characters seem less than they are. It's not damaging their dignity or integrity. They're still fun. You can still respect them at the end of the movie, that they haven't lost anything. And there's still little tags here and there in the film that have a little substance, little beats of drama that I really like. The little character moments with Spock, where he's relearning stuff and getting reconnected with Kirk and various other things, and getting reconnected with Sarek at the end of the film. And I love the end of the film where they being approached the new ship that they're going to get and realize they've made a new enterprise for them, and they've come home and they're off to another adventure, which would be Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, directed by William Shatner himself, which is widely regarded as a terrible film. I find something very enjoyable about Star Trek V. I find it is a bad film. I'm not going to deny that, but it's an enjoyably bad film. First off, I love Laurence Luckinbill as Sybok. I would love to see so much more of this character with him in the role. I think Sybok is a potentially fascinating and amazing character that I could have done a whole lot more with. And if it wasn't a better film that was better written, unfortunately better directed, Mr. Shatner, that if it could have been really good because Laurence Luckinbill does a great theatrical presence to the character. He has a lot of passion. He makes Cyborg exactly what he should be, and even takes a couple steps further than that. He's a theatrical character that he fills the screen, fills the presence of the scene with his passion and his theatricality and everything. Just great talent right there. And again, even though there's, in this film, as opposed to the last film, where they wanted to replicate some of that lighthearted romp type of stuff, but it turned into real bad comedy territory. And you could argue it does damage some dignity of the characters, but I still like some of the comedy bits. That it might be bad comedy, but it's very enjoyable stuff to me. I still find that this is a enjoyable film on a bad level. It's one of those films that it's so bad it's good, that I don't watch too many of those films, because usually it is such a bad film that it's difficult to just sit there and get enjoyment from it. These people are actually having some amount of fun, it looks like, making this film, and I enjoy it, because I do like the Cyborg character, even though the plot is completely preposterous. It completely makes no goddamn sense whatsoever, and them going to so-called meet God, which technically that's what Shatner really wanted. They wanted to have them go search for God himself and actually find the actual devil and deal with him, and that was, whoa, red flag territory. You're not going there in a Star Trek movie. Even Gene Roddenberry threw up the flags and said, no way, that's apocryphal, no chance in hell. And this film actually almost killed the franchise. It was not well received, obviously, and it came out in that summer of 1989, where you had Batman, Lethal Weapon 2, Ghostbusters 2, Indiana Jones' Last Crusade, whole bunch of stuff. And because, like Indiana Jones' Last Crusade, they couldn't get Industrial Light and Magic to do a visual effects because they were working on that film, so the visual effects are of a lower grade standard than the previous films. And they originally wanted Sean Connery for Cyborg, but he was doing Indiana Jones' The Last Crusade. But like I said, I don't think they got a downgrade in Laurence Luckinbill. I think he did a fantastic, amazing performance that really makes the film as enjoyable as I feel it is. And yeah, the bad comedy between Spock and Kirk and McCoy is bad, but there's a great scene, probably DeForest Kelly's best scene as Leonard Bones McCoy that he did in the entire run of the character, where Cyborg is showing him the death of his father, and it's just this emotionally wrenching, heartbreaking type of scene that's just the best thing he ever did in this role by far. And he did a lot of great stuff. He got like the best lines, the best moments, in some of the best stuff in this franchise. But the one thing that saved this franchise was that 1991 was going to be the 25th anniversary of Star Trek, so Paramount was willing to go forward and do another film to pay tribute, to honor the anniversary, and they got Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, which was the very first Star Trek film I ever saw, which was on cable. And I really liked this film. A lot of people it's not been poorly regarded at all. It's been very highly regarded. And it's one of those films that I always really, really liked. And for a while there, I kind of liked it more than Wrath of Khan. Over the years, it's kind of muddled it a little bit, because I've gotten a little bit more expansive about various other things in Star Trek universe. How the Klingons portrayed in other, like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and all these other things. Where Star Trek VI doesn't quite feel like it fits in that. It kind of feels like it's doing its own thing with the Klingons. That feels a little flat, a little one-dimensional. But it is a very good story that they're dealing with, sort of a very timely, maybe a little, at the time, a little too obvious, sort of end of the Cold War type of analogy with everything, with Praxis, the Klingon moon, exploding and needing to have peace so the Klingons can survive, and there's this conspiracy of war between Klingon and Federation people, and there's all this conspiracy stuff going on. There's a very conspiracy, political thriller type of thing, which is very interesting. It's very exciting. Christopher Plummer, doing General Chang. Now, I think it could have benefited from not doing so many random Shakespearean quotes. That I think it could have held a little bit more weight if there was a little more thematic purpose to all the Shakespearean stuff he was spouting out. But Christopher Plummer is one of the most stunning, amazing actors ever in the world. And yet with Star Trek VI, I do feel like there's some room for improvement in this film. And since it's also directed by Nicholas Meyer, I think it's fair to compare it to Wrath of Khan. Because with Wrath of Khan, it's that Hitchcockian thing where you can have two people just sitting at a table, just having a conversation, and it could be mundane. you put a bomb under the table and you show the bomb, it becomes amazingly more riveting. Khan is the bomb under the table in Wrath of Khan, that you have this presence of this terrifying, vengeful threat that is working slightly, subtly, carefully against Kirk, luring him into a trap that you know is coming. That becomes much more fascinating. Star Trek VI doesn't have a bomb under the table. It has the Enterprise crew going through the motions, just trying to find evidence of who the spy is, and trying to figure out this, that, and the other thing, and waiting for Kirk to get off of Rura Penthe, past their energy shield, off this penal planet, that you don't have that certain energy, you don't have that sense of consequence and dangers. Like, I think it would be a lot more exciting of a film if you had just those little hints of what the conspirators are doing behind the scenes against the Enterprise crew, to know what the danger is out there, to know what threat is lurking for them. Because as it is, they're just going through the motions, searching the ship, doing this, that, and everything, making very light excuses for not returning to space dock. There's not a lot of consequence for them doing what they're doing. Even when they fly into Klingon territory to rescue Kirk and McCoy from Rura Penthe, a penal plant where they've been sentenced to after being convicted of murdering the Chancellor, assassinating the Chancellor of the Klingon High Council, there's not a Klingon ship in sight. There's not a patrol anywhere. And you watch any bit of Star Trek, you know Klingons are notoriously lethal about protecting their borders. You'd think there'd be a dozen bird of preys or battle cruisers or something like that hot on their tails patrolling the border and making sure that there ain't no one coming in to try and rescue these hot political prisoners where they believe there's still a conspiracy somewhere out there going on. It doesn't address those issues. It takes things very lightly in that case. Even when they're going through that Klingon scanning station, they're whipping out all these books and this sort of comedy bit type of thing, trying to translate Klingon through a bunch of books where it's like, why do they have books when they have a computer where they could probably just have the computer decode everything and just speak Klingon back? I mean, I'm sure Uhura knows how to speak some Klingon, but it's moments that are played up for laughs that could have been played up for more dramatic tension, I think would have worked a lot better for the film in certain areas. But on the whole, it is a very, very good story. It's a necessary story in the Star Trek canon, that you had to go from this original series time period where they got the Federation and Klingons at odds, and then you got the Next Generation era, which had already begun, showing that they're both allies. You got to have that bridge. You have to have that moment to find out how things change in that political climate, to where they went from very familiar adversaries to very familiar friends and allies. And it's a very, very necessary story that's very well done. Like I said, in terms of dramatic areas of the film, there could have been a little better handled. But Star Trek VI, I think, is even above a lot of other science fiction films. It's smart, and when it came out, it was very timely, very topical, very necessary. It has all its characters very well. Being this 25th anniversary and the final film of the full cast and crew that they knew going into it would be, they take a lot of time to have each character of that crew have their own little moments in the film that feel pertinent and substantive. Even Sulu gets captain of the Excelsior, which is a fantastic little piece. And there's a lot of good stuff in there that subtly pays tribute to the franchise. If you know Star Trek well enough, you can really pick up on them, and real nice pieces here and there that really pays tribute to Star Trek in a great way, and is a great send-off for the whole cast. Those final moments in the film are very graceful and respectful, and they have a lot. They just let the cast go out in a really great moment. Too bad Star Trek Generations kind of ruined things a little bit here and there, but Star Trek VI, great send-off. And these 6 films, even though there's some places where things are not so good, things are going to be a little stronger, a little better, a little more fast-paced, there's some good stuff in every one of these films. I find very admirable and very enjoyable and very worthwhile. And you have various reviews in the written form for these. I've written reviews for the first film, the third, fifth, and sixth, and you can go down and get a little linkage below. Check those out. And this is the first video of the second anniversary of Forever Cinematic, so I hope you'll stick around for Friday the 13th. Which I'll go through all 12 films in a much more succinct manner than I did in the Star Trek was, because there's a little more to talk about with Star Trek than there is Friday the 13th, but I'll definitely do something that is very much a tribute to that franchise that I very much love. And I'll see you later. See you with a review of Riddick at the end of the week. And as always, comments, likes, subscribes, feedback. What's your favorite Star Trek film? What do you think is the worst Star Trek film? Give me some feedback. What's your favorite series? Who's your favorite captain? Put some comments below. Start some of the discussion. I love Star Trek. Even for this review, I took down all my Star Wars box sets, put up Star Trek. So for all you purists out there, Star Trek, live long and prosper. See you later.